it's gone from bad to worse. He's been caught accepting donations to pay for his wife's dresses. He's been accepting more freebies than any other MP in Parliament.
Liz Truss just dropped a humiliation bomb on Keir Starmer that's shaking up Westminster like never before. Seriously, who knew the former Prime Minister had this level of energy reserved for a takedown?
It's a disastrous start for his government because they came in with no ideas about what they were going to do.
While most people might quietly grumble about a corruption scandal or the mess that is Starmer's budget handling, Liz went full throttle, armed with receipts, facts, and a mic drop attitude. We're talking about Starmer accepting luxurious gifts from Lord Ali and indulging in perks like he's a royal, all while the rest of the country is barely scraping by.
And it's a disaster. Our economy is stagnating. Meanwhile, China is selling us solar panels. I mean, why does that make sense? And the problem is we have a Labour Party now in government.
It's like pensioners are choosing between heating and eating, and this guy is out here collecting more goodies than Santa on a holiday binge. And Liz, well, she did not hold back. She's basically the only one brave enough to call out the Prime Minister for treating the country's resources like his personal buffet. And she did it in a way that left jaws on the floor.
They voted Labour, they didn't particularly like him, and now it's gone from bad to worse. He's been caught accepting donations to pay for his wife's dresses. He's been accepting more freebies than any other MP in Parliament. But meanwhile, because of their disastrous economic policies, they are cutting payments to old people.
And honestly, Keir Starmer, after all this, has been stumbling through a rough patch, desperately trying to convince the British public that he's the man with the plan. But now, most people just aren't buying it. His approval ratings are in free fall, and really, can you blame anyone? His reputation is stuck in a swamp of broken promises and misplaced trust. It's like every time he opens his mouth, people are bracing themselves for yet another underwhelming disappointment. And let's be real, it's not like the masses were lining up with flowers and chocolates to vote him into Downing Street in the first place. Nope, his so-called victory was more of a grumpy, reluctant vote against the Conservatives rather than an enthusiastic thumbs up for Labour. Enter Liz Truss, the Conservative powerhouse who's taking no prisoners.
Do not agree with these policies, and this is why this government is already very unpopular. Keir Starmer's ratings have plummeted.
You have to hand it to her. She's got a sixth sense for political weak spots, and she's going after Starmer like a hawk swooping in on a wounded mouse. Truss is out here calling his government authoritarian, obsessed with micromanaging everything from our wallets to our thermostats, all while the economy teeters on the brink of collapse. And it's not just her venting for the sake of drama. She's making some uncomfortable but pretty valid points. According to Truss, Labour's budget is about as business-friendly as a porcupine in a balloon shop. Instead of championing free market capitalism, Starmer and his team seem to be pushing an economic agenda that's more socialist than a Marxist book club. Investments are drying up faster than a puddle in the Sahara, and businesses are getting crushed under what she describes as an anti-business, red tape nightmare.
Getting more oil and gas. We in Britain have ended up closing down our oil and gas. This is what's happening under this Labour government. We've just closed our last steelworks, producing virgin steel because energy is unaffordable.
And let's dig into those economic headaches, shall we? Labour's budget is basically a masterclass in what not to do if you want to run a successful economy. Taxes are climbing to levels that make even the most die-hard tax enthusiasts wince, and benefits? Well, those are being slashed faster than a budget airline's baggage allowance, hitting the most vulnerable members of society, especially pensioners. People are feeling the pinch, and not in the way that makes for cute anecdotes.
China is selling us solar panels. I mean, why does that make sense? And the problem is we have a Labour Party now in government who are saying that climate change is more of a threat to the future of the world than China.
There's a very real sense of betrayal, especially considering Labour's promises to ease economic pressures, not pile more on. But here we are, with Starmer at the wheel, steering straight into policies that seem tailor-made to squeeze every last bit of financial stability out of ordinary Britons. And Truss, like a relentless referee, keeps blowing the whistle on the absurdity of it all. She's calling out the government's spending splurge on public sector pay raises while simultaneously drowning private enterprise under taxes and regulations. It's like Labour is determined to drive a wedge between the sectors that, fun fact, actually need to cooperate for the economy to breathe.
The only mandate she's ever had is from members opposite. It was a mandate built on fantasy economics and it ended in disaster. The country's got nothing to show for it.
And don't even get started on the business community. These are the folks who are supposed to be the economy's engine, the innovators, the job creators. But thanks to Starmer's restrictive energy policies and that all-consuming obsession with net zero, they're practically fleeing the country. Energy costs are soaring, and manufacturing plants are either shutting down or packing their bags for friendlier shores. This isn't just bad news for the business owners, it's a death knell for jobs and economic stability. Truss has been hammering this point like a carpenter on a caffeine high. You can't grow an economy by making it more expensive to produce goods or by burying entrepreneurs under an avalanche of regulations. Labour seems determined to snuff out any flicker of economic recovery, and Truss is making sure the public doesn't forget it.
Need a long time to fix those things, and you'll know in a parliamentary democracy like Britain or Australia, it just takes time to get the legislation through, and it takes politicians with courage, and there has been a massive courage deficit.
And here we are, with tensions boiling over like an overworked kettle. Starmer promised change, but instead his government is serving up policies that hurt the very people Labour is supposed to champion. And with every fumble, every miscalculated move, Liz Truss is there, mic in hand, reminding everyone that this mess isn't what Britain signed up for. And how can we forget about pensioners? Some of the most vulnerable members of our society are absolutely fuming, and it's not hard to see why. Labour's decision to freeze winter fuel payments for 1.6 million pensioners has landed with all the grace of a sledgehammer to the kneecap, and just in time for energy prices to reach stomach-churning new heights too.
Not a quitter. We have delivered on the energy price guarantee. We delivered on the...
This isn't just some minor inconvenience. It's a full-blown crisis for many elderly people who now face the grim reality of having to choose between heating their homes or buying essentials. Picture widows and seniors on fixed incomes shivering through a brutal British winter because suddenly there's a yawning black hole where their heating budget used to be. And while pensioners brace for a cold, miserable season, the optics for Starmer couldn't be worse. Seriously, if you tried to write a script about political tone deafness, this would be it. The man has reportedly racked up around $17,000 worth of gifts and hospitality since taking office, and we're not talking about a couple of free pens or a basket of muffins. Oh no, these are glamorous event tickets, luxury hotel stays, and VIP treatment at fancy festivals.
When we were in government. So we were boxed in by the Blairite consensus, and that's made it very hard for us to deport illegal immigrants. It's made it very hard for us to put in proper policies on women being women and men being men. And the problem is that in Britain, the bureaucrats' power has grown over time, so more power.
It's like he's living in a never-ending episode of Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, while pensioners are left to ration their heat. And what does this do for his public image? Well, let's just say being one of the top MPs in freebie land has made him a bullseye for public outrage. People are looking at this stark contrast, pensioners freezing while their PM revels in luxury, and they're not exactly in a forgiving mood.
He's massively out of touch with what normal people in Britain think. He is part of an elite political class that is obsessed with climate change. They don't like Israel. They're pro-Palestinian. They are anti the instincts, the patriotism.
And as if that wasn't enough to light a fire, the government's energy policies are adding another layer of pain. Labour's all-in approach to net zero has critics sounding alarms left, right and centre, and honestly, who can blame them? The once mighty steel and energy plants are getting whacked, and these aren't just numbers on some economic spreadsheet. These are real communities, real jobs, real families being tossed into economic uncertainty. Energy prices have shot up faster than a toddler on too much sugar, all thanks to Labour's restrictive regulations and refusal to consider cheaper alternatives. The British steel industry? barely hanging on. Manufacturing, struggling to stay afloat. It's a mess, and the ripple effects are devastating.
I'm not a quitter. We have delivered on the energy price guarantee. We've delivered on the energy price guarantee. We've delivered on national insurance. We are going to deliver.
Now, you'd think Labour would be open to at least discussing solutions like fracking or exploring domestic energy sources, right? Wrong. The government is about as flexible as a concrete block on this issue, refusing to budge an inch on fracking, no matter how many experts say it could ease the crisis. Critics are practically banging their heads against the wall, pointing out that tapping into local energy sources could make the UK more self-sufficient and give the economy a much-needed boost.
People who live in the big cities, who work for the public sector, they don't represent normal people across Britain who back Israel, who see China as a threat, and want a strong foreign policy from Britain.
Enter Liz Truss, wielding her no-nonsense, tell-it-like-it-is attitude. She's not just poking holes in Labour's energy policies, she's shredding them, calling out what she sees as economic self-sabotage disguised as environmental responsibility. Truss has bluntly pointed out the irony. While Britain cripples itself trying to reach green goals, countries like China are out there burning fossil fuels without a care, building coal plants like it's an Olympic sport, and then selling overpriced solar panels to us. The bitter twist? Britain's doing all this self-sacrifice while the biggest polluters carry on, guilt-free. It's a hard pill to swallow, and the public is anything but amused.
No idea. He has no plan, and he has no...
I think the problem in Britain has got much worse, and it got worse during the Blair government, because he put in lots of legislation, like the Human Rights Act, like the Equality Act, that ended up tying politicians' hands. And we weren't brave enough to take on those ideas.
This obsession with climate policies at the expense of everything else is starting to look less like responsible governance and more like a kamikaze mission. Energy bills are crushing households, key industries are floundering, and the economy feels like it's in a slow-motion collapse. Yet Labour keeps charging forward, waving the green flag, even if it means dragging the entire nation into economic stagnation. Critics have started using the phrase unilateral economic disarmament to describe the situation, and honestly, it's not far off. While we scale back essential energy production, other countries are zooming ahead, prioritising their growth and stability. The anxiety is real, especially among people who understand that energy isn't just an environmental issue, it's the backbone of economic success. Labour's dream of a greener future sounds nice in theory, but when the reality is this bleak, it feels like a fantasy. Liz Truss is asking the question on everyone's mind: how much longer can Britain afford to play this losing game? And with pensioners, businesses, and entire communities suffering, that question is becoming more urgent by the day. Every choice Labour makes has a ripple effect, and those ripples are starting to look like a tidal wave crashing into the livelihoods of the people they're supposed to be protecting.